Sports Talk Chicago. Here with Jon Zaghloul, and we are back and ready for today's special guest. He's the digital content manager and Chicago Cubs reporter for the Marquee Sports Network. Please welcome Tony Andracki to the program. Tony, it's great to have you on. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for being here. What's wrong with the Cubs bats, Tony?
Well, that's a very nuanced question. Excuse me. And I don't have a good answer. I don't think that they really have a good answer. If they did, they would have fixed it and corrected some of these issues. I think the simplest answer is just the fact that, it is only 9 games into the season, and you can say, it's early. Excuse me. You can say it's early only for so long, but it is still early. In a 162 game season, we're only a tiny fraction of the way through that regular season schedule. Last year with the 60 game schedule, I think it changed a little bit of everybody's perception. Like, if it were last year, we'd be a sixth of the way through the season right now, and it would feel so much different. So, I think there's a level of patience and these guys getting back to where they want to be. It is funny, and it is kind of weird because, Wilson Contreras and Jack Pederson were absolutely phenomenal in spring training. And then the season starts and, both of those guys have struggled in various regards. So, it's not how anybody thought it was going to go, I don't think, particularly with the Cubs, but they have plenty of time to turn it around and get right on the right track.
Do you think this is a pattern or a carryover from years past, or is this new?
I think it's probably yes to both, if that makes sense. So I think there's an element of it that is a pattern because that's who these guys are as hitters, right? Like that's why Jed Hoyer said, and Theo Epstein, even before he stepped down, that's why they've said, this offseason and the last couple off seasons that they want to try to differentiate and diversify the lineup because they know they have a lot of guys who, have swing and miss, who hit the ball out of the ballpark a lot. And those guys just tend to struggle and slump at times. They can have hot streaks, like a guy like Javier Baez and Wilson Contreras. They have incredible hot streaks when they're on, and when they're cold, they can be pretty cold. They can swing and miss quite a bit here and there. And so if you have a lineup made up of too many of those guys, then obviously it gets difficult. And I think that's part of why they wanted Jack Pederson, who he handles elite velocity and high velocity, high in the strike zone pretty well. And we've seen that a little bit, the homer he hit in the final game of the Brewers series to tie things up, and some of the other, situational hitting that Pederson and stuff has brought to this team. I think really it's more about, probably the mental aspect. I think there's probably a mental component of it to these guys that may carry over from last year or may have carried over from years before. But yeah, it's just, they always say hitting's contagious, and for the first 9 games of the season, really, Kris Bryant is the only hitter that looks, kind of the form that we've come to expect from these guys. So they'll come. It will come with these guys. I don't know exactly when. I think everybody kind of was expecting that it would have happened, prior to this point.
How surprised are you by Bryant's performance?
Oh, not surprised at all. I think that, it's always been health with him. And last year was such a strange year. So it's so difficult to you throw these things out. And if you throw out last year, I mean, when healthy, Bryant has put up, MVP caliber numbers or close to it. He's a guy with, a 370 plus on base percentage and usually hitting around 270 plus and slugging over 5 and has a great view of the strike zone and just great judgment there. Doesn't chase a whole lot. Lays off pitches that are really close. He goes from 0-2 in the count to 4-2 and draw a walk more than anybody that I've ever seen. And he's already done that at least once this year, maybe twice. But so I'm not surprised at all. I think it really has just come down to health, and he looks very healthy now. He's said that he feels healthy, and I think we're seeing that on the field too.
Tony Andracki here on Sports Talk Chicago. Tony, did you expect Craig Kimbrels' resurgence?
You know what? I'd be lying if I said I expected this. I think, he's like, I forget what exactly it was, but his FIP, his fielding independent pitching was negative. So, I mean, like basically it should be less than 0 according. So it broke the metric. It broke the system and how they come up with that because he's just been so dominant. You know, he struck out 9 of the 14 batters he's faced. Everybody that, been out, nobody's reached even via a walk or hit against him. So, yeah, I expected him to be pretty good. I thought that the full spring training would really help him out. It's the first time since 2018 that he's had that normal runway to get up to speed. And you kind of saw it at the end of spring too, like the velocity was ticking up, the fastball had that rising quality that he likes, and he, just the production, he was getting outs and striking guys out. And I think that 6-week runway in spring training has a lot to do with it. Last year, he was just rushing to try to get ready as quickly as possible. And pitchers only had 3 weeks to get up to speed for that 60-game season. And then 2 years ago, he signed in the middle of the year. So I'm not surprised at all that he's doing this. I am a little surprised that he hasn't even allowed a base runner yet, because that's just, phenomenal, like dynamic stuff. But yeah, I think Kimbrel, this is back to the guy that the Cubs thought they were getting when they first signed him. And I don't think anybody's really surprised by this.
How impressed are you with the Cubs pitching in general right now, both the bullpen and rotation?
Yeah, I think really impressed. I thought that they were going to surprise people. I thought particularly the rotation was going to surprise folks, because a lot of people were looking at it and pointing and saying, hey, these guys don't throw very hard, and their fastball velocity is only sitting around the 90 or the low 90s, when everybody else around the game is ticking up into the mid to upper 90s, even as starting pitchers. But I think, they have that pitchability quality that allows them to work with changeups. And Trevor Williams, in his first outing, he was spinning 5 different pitches for strikes, and they don't walk a lot of batters, and they shouldn't walk a lot of batters when they're on. And so I think all of that is kind of exactly what I thought it was going to be. Kyle Hendricks' first start was a little bit of a surprise. It was, especially just with the walks, he had gone 2 years of the day without walking more than 2 guys in the start before that opening day start. And then, how Davies and Williams performed in the final 2 games of this series in Pittsburgh, I think was, a little bit of a disappointment to that. But they both had phenomenal first starts, and I think will really be nice pieces for this team moving forward.
Is any of this sustainable right now?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, Arrieta is the one that I have my eye on, he and Alzolay, because Arrieta, his numbers are really good. I mean, he has the 2.25 ERA, but he has allowed a decent amount of base runners. What is it, like 17 and 12 innings? And he is getting a decent amount of swing and miss. But I think with him, it's if he's able to keep his stuff, and he's admitted that he hasn't really had his best stuff yet, but he's still been able to find success and churn out back-to-back quality starts. So I think once he really, starts getting locked in and gets a better feel for, his cutter or his curveball or whatever pitch it is that he feels like is eluding him, then yeah, I think he can, get back to being more of the pitcher that we saw, not the 2015 run, but, be the guy that has a 2.25 ERA for some stretches, or, is a legitimate number 2 in this rotation. And then Alzolay too, he made, essentially one bad pitch in his first start of the season, and that came back to haunt him because he was a 3-run homer. But he really settled in from there, and I think, showed some good moxie to be able to get past that. So I think those 2 guys are really important, because I think, with Hendricks, he's not going to really have too many clunkers like we saw from opening day. And then Williams and Davies, they might have an outing here or there like that, but I think it's sustainable that they're going to get back to similar type of guys that they were the first start out, where they're pitching to contact a lot, eliciting a lot of weak contact, and letting that Cubs defense work behind them.
There's no chance, or there haven't been any talks about maybe putting Alec Mills back in the rotation and taking out Alzolay, right? Could that happen?
Yeah, that can happen. I think that will happen later on in the year. I don't think that's going to happen right now, but yeah, I think Mills is going to make some starts for this team. I don't know how many. I don't know that the Cubs really know that either, but I think, it wouldn't be shocking to see him make 10 or 12 or 15 starts for this team, just because the innings that all these guys are going to have to account for. even Kyle Hendricks, who is in great shape and has built up really well and was, I think he actually led the National League or was close to leading the National League in innings last year. Even he might not necessarily approach 200 innings. So they could skip his turn in the rotation later in the year, whatever it is, go to a 6-man rotation and throw Mills in there. And then with Alzolay in specific, like you asked about, he is somebody who he hasn't thrown over 100 innings in a professional season since 2017. So his workload will definitely be more decreased compared to Hendricks or maybe even an Arrieta or Williams or something. So I think at some point, they'll skip Alzolay's turn or maybe move him to the bullpen or whatever it may be. And I think Mills can come in the rotation then. And I just think in general, Mills is that backup. Like I said, if they go to a 6-man rotation or if anybody else gets hurt and they need to slot somebody in, they have him right there readily available.
Tony Andracki here on Sports Talk Chicago. Tony, should the Cubs pay Anthony Rizzo?
That's not for me to say whether they should or shouldn't. I think a lot of fans want them to, and I totally understand that. I think a lot of players in the clubhouse and coaches probably want them to as well. Ultimately, I think it will get done. I think as we get further in the season and everybody around baseball and around professional sports, sees how the vaccines take off and how hopefully the pandemic continues to, scale back and not become as big of a factor as it has been for the last year or so. I think, more fans in the stands, that'll all help every team, every professional team's budget for the future come into focus. And so I think, there's definitely an avenue to signing Rizzo long-term. I still don't think he's going to go anywhere. I can't imagine Rizzo playing for another team. The Cubs don't have a first baseman behind him really in the pipeline, a top prospect or anything like that. So it just makes too much sense, I think, that they eventually sign him. Maybe it does take until late summer or fall or even after the regular season is over. But ultimately, I think Rizzo will be playing first base for the Cubs next year.
Are you at all concerned about possible regression for him and the Cubs paying him and then having his numbers go down?
No, I don't think so with him in particular, because his game is not necessarily built off of, speed or athleticism or anything that some of these other guys' games are built off of. He's a first baseman and, his sprint speed isn't necessarily towards the top of the league, but, he has this great approach at the plate where, he walks almost as much as he strikes out. And last year in spring training, before the shutdown, the Cubs all got together and determined, like, hey, whose play approach do you like the most? And almost everybody said Rizzo, because he chokes up with 2 strikes. He tries to put the ball in play. He goes the other way and uses all sides of the field. And that approach is something that only gets more refined as you age. And it's not, really like you have to be 27 to do it. So I think he's definitely somebody that there's no concern about. And, he is like the face of the franchise and so important to this team and his charitable efforts off the field and, his leadership in the clubhouse and stuff. So, I don't think there's really any concern about him in particular, aging and worrying about how that might affect his game.
What's his legacy in a Cubs uniform?
That's a really good question. I think his legacy will always be, I think the 2016 team will be synonymous with Rizzo and a lot of these guys with Lester and Arrieta, Kyle Hendricks, Kris Bryant, any of these players. But I think Rizzo maybe is a step above some of those other guys just because he was the face of the franchise. He saw the losing in 2013, 2014, and as they climbed and rose to become the 97 win team in 2015 and obviously winning the World Series in 2016. He's a guy that, has given millions of dollars to this community and to, Lurie's Children's Hospital in Chicago and all these different things to help cancer research and just his foundation is incredible too. And he was a guy at that 2016 World Series rally in Grant Park. He stepped up to the podium and delivered a speech. So I think that's his legacy right now. I think it certainly can still add another chapter or two to it as well. Like if the Cubs do win the World Series, and he's still part of the team and he's still hitting the heart of the order and a leader for this team and in the community, I think that can only, help it. But yeah, I don't think, for generations to come, I think Cubs fans are going to know Anthony Rizzo's name.